Hello and welcome to Heartlight Vedic Astrology. Today I was going to go through planetary transits, or Gochara as they're known as in Sanskrit, for the month of December 2023. This is all from a Vedic astrology or Jyotish perspective, and it seemed like the overarching theme for the month was planting seeds of purpose. So let's go ahead. A note beforehand, the information presented here is for educational purposes only and should not be considered medical, financial, professional, or life advice of any kind. If you are in need, please contact an appropriate professional for support. And then you might take a minute or two to read the rest of this disclaimer. If you're new to Vedic astrology or my videos, you might note that all of my teaching videos on the subject are in my concepts playlist so that they're easy to find. And wherever you see a double asterisk in one of my talks, that means there's a teaching video on that subject. So if you want to learn more, the information's available. For this particular talk, my interpretation videos, I integrate a lot of concepts. And so if you're a beginner and you start to listen and you're starting to get lost, you might go back and look at some of these videos, which are North, South, and East Indian style charts, introduction to navigating a birth chart, the lagna, ascendant, rising sign, first house, all different names for the same thing, introduction to the constellations or rashis, constellation or rashi categories, planetary aspects, natural benefic and malefic planets or grahas, nakshatras or lunar mansions. For this particular talk, Kala Sarpa Yoga, the ambition combination, if you don't know about what Kala Sarpa is. And then I have a whole playlist on the planets or grahas, a video on each planet. Rahu and Ketu I group together because they're similar in many ways. And then also you might check out symbolism of each house or bhava. And so especially for the charts that I go through today, I think especially the second and third house, which I have videos on, are important. And then that playlist for houses and bhavas is growing, so I'll be continuing to build that list up over the next few months. All right, so let's talk about what the transits are, and then go through the dates for the month, and then we'll get into what all this means. So December 3rd, that's tomorrow, based on when I'm recording this video, the sun will enter Jyeshta nakshatra. On December 5th, Venus enters Swati nakshatra. On December 7th, Jupiter has a direct aspect on Mercury. On December 9th, Mercury enters Purva Ashada nakshatra. And also that day, it's a busy day. Venus and Jupiter have a direct mutual aspect with each other, and Mars enters Jyeshta nakshatra. On December 12th, there's a new moon in Scorpio, also known as Vrishika in Sanskrit. December 13th, Mercury goes retrograde, or Vakri. December 16th, another busy day. Sun enters Sagittarius and Mula Nakshatra at the same time. That's called Sankranti in Sanskrit. Also, Mercury re-enters Mula Nakshatra and Venus enters Vishaka Nakshatra. So we have a few days during the month when we have a bunch of different shifts at the same time, which can be a bit jarring or maybe a bit chaotic, but we'll talk about it. December 17th, Mercury goes combust or asta. December 18th, Jupiter has a direct aspect on Mercury. December 21st is the winter solstice, and I'll be doing a separate video. I'm going through the chart for the winter solstice, so keep a lookout for that. December 22nd, Mercury crosses Sun. December 24th, Venus enters Scorpio or Vrishika, a Rashi constellation. On December 26th, there's a full moon in Gemini, Mithuna. On December 27th, we have a lot going on. December 27th, Jupiter has a direct aspect on the Sun. Mercury and Mars are in planetary war, or graha yuddha. Venus enters Anuradha nakshatra, and then Mars enters Sagittarius, or Danu, and Mula nakshatra simultaneously. On December 28th, Mercury re-enters Scorpio, or and Jyeshta nakshatra at the same time. December 29th, Sun enters Purva Ashada nakshatra. December 30th, Jupiter goes progressive. And January 1st, it's not December, but seems important to add in case you miss it at the conjunction months. is that Mercury goes progressive and there's a direct aspect on Venus by Saturn. So those are the dates for the month. Okie doke. So let's just look at the sky pattern for the beginning of December and end of December, and then kind of look at how things will shift during the month. So this first chart on the left is a chart for December 1st, 2023. At the time of this chart is 1400. So I missed a number there. I'll have to check on there. It's about 2 o'clock in the afternoon Eastern Standard Time. Um, it is an Aries or Mesha Lugna. The reason why is I made it a Aries or Mesha Lugna so that it matches with the natural zodiac. The natural zodiac is you can kind of think of it like a zodiac or a birth chart for the whole world. And that's where you take the first constellation of Aries and you put it in the first house, and then you make a chart from that. So the moon nakshatra is in Pusha. The Dasha sequence at the time at this particular moment is Saturn, Ketu, Venus, Mars. And then sort of interesting here is that we have Venus and Moon, Karko Bhavanasha, which I'll discuss in just a second. And then, so it seems like the overall vibe for this particular moment is healing issues of separation with mom, home, spouse, partner. So why is this? Well, first of all, the moon is in the fourth house, which creates a Karko Bhavanasha. And again, there's a video on that if you don't know what that means. But it essentially creates problems when moon is in the fourth house because the moon represents mother and the fourth house also represents mother. And sometimes it might seem like, oh, that's a good thing for the planet that represents mom and the house that represents mom to be aligned. But in some ways, it's almost like too much energy. You can kind of think of it that way. And so when we have moon Karko Bhavanasha, I can indicate issues with mom. Yeah. And here the moon's in Pusha. So the mom energy, Pusha Nakshatra is symbolized by the udder of a cow. So that's a very nurturing, nourishing, stabilizing type of energy. It's actually considered to be one of the nicest nakshatras. So it doesn't seem like the issue is there may be issues of stabilization and nourishment, although there might be plenty of that. But what I'm seeing here is that Saturn is in the eighth house from the fourth house. So Saturn is in its own sign of Aquarius. And Saturn at this moment in time, at the time of this chart, is in a nakshatra called Shatabhisha. Shatabhisha translates as 100 healers. And so when we have a malefic planet such as Saturn in that nakshatra, it can indicate issues with disease or health that are difficult to diagnose or cure. Okay, so there may be health issues for mom or a mother-like figure, maternal figure, in generally, or women in general. Because again, we're looking at the natural zodiac, so we're looking at the horoscope for the whole world. So it looks like there may be issues with women in general, not just moms, because I'll get into the Venus Karka Bhavanash as well. But it just looks like there's some stress or long-term chronic stress or structural issues related to chronic health and that sort of thing related to mom. And then if we look at the Venus Karka Bhavanasha, Venus represents is a planet that represents spouse or spouse-like partner, and it's in the seventh house, which is a house that represents spouse or spouse-like partner. So again, we have a Karka Bhavanasha, and so while in many ways this might be uh, beneficial, and there's some energy related to relationships, especially partnerships. It could be independent business. But it could also likely be a spouse or spouse-like partner. That again, there are probably issues here. And again, it doesn't have to be between the native and the partner. It could just be within the partner's life themselves. Yeah. So, hold on just a second here. Yeah, I was trying to see if just to double check, but I believe Venus is in Chitra nakshatra. Chitra is symbolized by a gemstone, and so Chitra is often that nakshatra is related to like architecture and structure and that sort of thing. Um, and it is nice because we have this retrograde Jupiter aspecting onto Venus. So I think that offers some, and Jupiter's in Ashwini, which is a nakshatra related to healing. So I do think that there's a lot of positive energy here. Um, but again, something seems to be amiss as well. Yeah. And what was I going to say? Yeah, so it just seemed like there might be some separation issues here. Because the other thing is that the strong Saturn in Aquarius is also aspecting onto this retrograde Jupiter. So so with Venus and Chitra, I'm thinking like structure and relationships and that sort of thing. And there's some kind of healing or kind of amelioration energy come from Jupiter. The thing though is that Saturn, really strong Saturn, is slowing down the Jupiter and the ability for Jupiter to deliver its healing energy. So if there's like a restructuring that's happening, it's not going probably as fast as the people in the relationship would like. So again, that's just a general energy. Um, oh, that's the other thing. Yeah. So with this one, I think the other important thing is that this Saturn is also shining, aspecting its light, its energy into the eighth house, where you see Mars and Sun. Um, and Mars and Sun on the first, that was yesterday, were both in Anuradha. So there's this Anuradha nakshatra is a nakshatra that indicates victory, but through building bridges and building alliances. So again, this Saturn is slowing down this energy of Mars and Sun, and Mars is aspecting onto Saturn. So there is this kind of tension, I would say, between Saturn and Mars. And Saturn is planet that symbolizes long-term planning, structure, old school, old traditions, that sort of thing. And Mars is an innovator. So there's this tension between maintaining the status quo and creating like new alliances. Yeah. And so what's interesting to me is that, again, if we're talking about the world horoscope, um, as Mars and Sun are leaving Anuradha Nakshatra and they're moving into Jyeshta Nakshatra, or they're in the process of doing that. We're seeing that, for example, that truce, that temporary truce between Israel and Hamas in the Middle East, where there was an exchange of hostages and prisoners and stuff. Hostages, I guess, not prisoners, but so that happened when Mars and Sun were in Anuradha about building bridges and kind of looking for win-win solutions. But now they're ending that and kind of going back to, their military warfare, unfortunately. So there is this, again, tension, right? And Venus, besides representing things like spouses, it can represent loved ones in general. So there's this attempt for healing here, but then on the side here, deep within the psychology, even though the psychology is attempting new innovative breakthroughs and again victory through alliances, this massive Saturn is slowing all this down and actually kind of turning things back a bit. So that's the beginning of the month. And then if we look at the chart on the right here, December 31st, this is 12:11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Um, yeah, so again, we have an Aries Mesha Lagna, so that we have aligned with the natural zodiac. The moon nakshatra at the end of the month is in Maga. Maga is symbolized by a throne. So now we're looking at energy of like leadership and government or governance. The Dasha sequence for the second chart is K2 Jupiter Venus Venus. Um, So again, there's this what would you say, like a separation of kind of goodness here in a way, like good intentions, yeah, or unusual good intentions, and that might correspond with the end of the month. There are a lot of holidays around the world, like Christmas and Kwanzaa. I think I'm not sure when Hanukkah starts. That starts at different times, usually in December. So yeah, a lot of different holidays around the world. So there's some tension here. It may, even though there's some attempt to create this goodwill, there may be some separation from it as well. At least that's based on what people are experiencing. And the other thing is we had now, instead of having Venus and Moon in Karka Bhava Nasha in the first chart, now we have Sun in Karka Bhava Nasha in the second chart here. So the Sun represents father, authority, government, king, president, those sorts of positions, head of state. And so there's difficulty here. And so it seems like even though there's this attempt in the first part of the month to heal relationships and bring people together, you have this tension where now you're getting back to some sort of like almost emergency issue that's coming about, that's going to draw people away from this kind of attempt to rebuild relationships and create more of a positive, supportive ambiance. Yeah. And I have all these arrows here because why? Oh, okay. Let me go through it. So you can see this. There's this orange dotted line, double-sided arrow between the first house and the ninth house. And that's because Jupiter and Mars will be in a parivartana yoga at this time, meaning that Jupiter is in a house ruled by Mars and Mars is in a house ruled by Jupiter. So you can kind of think about when that happens, you can kind of swap planets in your mind. And the thing is, the reason why I drew all these arrows is just so you could, appreciate really when you have two planets in parivartana, an exchange of houses, um, what happens is, especially if they're outer planets, and the outer planets are Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn have, besides their kind of direct aspects, which all the planets except Rahu and Ketu have, and the direct aspect is they shine their light into the house directly opposite from where they're sitting, planets. Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn have special aspects, so they have a couple of additional houses that they shine their lighter energy into. And so, especially when you have a parivartana with one or two of those guys, they're going to start infiltrating and dominating the chart. So, if we look at, um, I drew in these sort of yellow, orangey type arrows, solid ones. You see three of them going away from Jupiter. Okay, and those are the houses. So house 5, house 7, house 9. Those are the houses that Jupiter, sitting where it sits now, will aspect its light and energy into. When you flip Jupiter into the ninth house, because of this parivartana with Mars, then you see these three arrows moving out of the ninth house into the first house, the third house, and the fifth house. So all this golden, arrow energy is all Jupiter. And if you compare it to the first chart, you can see like these three arrows, like how much more of this Jupiterian energy is available and influencing the chart, which is probably a good thing because Jupiter is generally a benefic planet, although there can be issues with it. So that's nice. But at the same time, you see this Mars. So if you look in the first chart, Mars has three arrows, three red arrows coming out of it or coming away from the house that it sits in, right? And it goes 4 houses away, 7 houses away, and 8 houses away. That's what Mars does with its aspects. In the second chart, you have three arrows moving away from Mars. But then when you imagine Mars going into the first house, I also have three red arrows coming away from the first house. So you can see also Mars is doubled up on its influence in the chart. Okay, and so Jupiter, it's an Ashwini, so it's a healing, emergency type of energy here. Mars is the warrior. Mars is the head of the army. It's like the CEO type person in the mix. Yeah, hands-on person. So, and especially when you have Mars and Sun together here, that's a lot of fiery energy. The other thing is Mars in the second chart is in Mula Nakshatra. Mula Nakshatra is symbolized by a bunch of roots tied together. And, Mula energy, it's pretty intense. The deity associated with that nakshatra is Kali, a goddess of destruction. And so, if you have negative planets in Mula, that can indicate a lot of destruction. And Mars is a malefic planet. Um, yeah. Luckily, though, the Jupiter's aspecting into this house of Sagittarius when Mars and Sun are sitting, so that's gonna, soften the edges or intensities a bit, not entirely. Um, yeah, so there's this kind of new again, there's this new kind of emergency issue arising with like boss or guru, father, government, that's going to kind of juxtapose or pull people out of this attempt to soften and heal that's happening at the beginning of the month. So again, this can happen on a personal basis, or again, it looks like a global basis. So, and we'll see as I go through the rest of the talk that actually the time between was it the Christmas or about Christmas? So 25th of December through the end of the year, it's going to be pretty intense. And we'll talk more about that. But you can see the energy shifting from this attempt to, be in the holiday spirit and, enjoy the holidays and this sort of thing to, okay, things are kind of heating up. And even if it's just, getting out of vacation mode and ramping up to get back into the fray of work, it can even happen on that level for people. So that's what's going on with the sky pattern this month. Okay, so let's take a look at the sun or surya transits for the month. So on December 3rd, sun enters Jyeshta Nakshatra. Jyeshta Nakshatra is symbolized by a talisman. So there's this like protective energy around it. Surround, kind of connected to it. And it can be a physical protection, like almost like a law enforcement type, military or like police and military type energy. It can also be a spiritual protection, like a talisman that a shaman might carry. But either way, there's this sort of protective energy. And again, we're talking about the sun here. So, sun represents things like work, career, boss, government, leadership, military. So, again, there may, there's this general ramping up of potentially military energy, which we are seeing in the Middle East, again, after a temporary ceasefire that they had going on. But there can also again, because Jesta can represent like a spiritual type of protection. It could also indicate that these sorts of things like career, work, purpose, are actually getting spiritualized and protected spiritually. So, for those of you who kind of resonate with that type of experience or level of awareness, there can also be like stepping into like a more of like an senior position, either physically in work or becoming more of like a spiritual elder in a community, that sort of thing. Because Jesa can also represent like somebody in a senior position or like the oldest like sibling, if there are a bunch of kids in a family, that sort of thing. So yeah, so the sun is shifting energy away from that anurata energy. Then December 16th, sun enters Sagittarius or Danu, and the Mula Nakshatra, which we mentioned, I talked a bit about on the last slide. So this is going to be, a little bit Um, and maybe a little bit of rock and roll here, because the sun represents also general vitality and health. And moving from Scorpio into Sagittarius, this is a Gandanta, they call it. It's like this. It's a big kind of I don't know, sort of in my mind, mysterious chasm where there's a lot of like deep, dark energy, and it's very intense. It's like the tail of the scorpion, for Scorpio people. And so, and again, the goddess of destruction is associated with Mula. So generally, when planets start moving through Mula, that can indicate like just sudden or unexpected. People might see it as a death or decay, but it's actually a transformation. Because it's when I think of Mula, because again, the symbol of Mula is a bunch of roots, tied together. And a root is actually a bulb. It's actually like a generator of life. But for the bulb to start growing or the seed to start growing, there's this transformation energy. Like the seed has to die to itself to become a plant. So it's almost like I could see where Mula is sort of like the tower card in tarot. If you're into tarot, um, it's kind of like 'cause, most people they're like, oh, the tower is not a good card or not good energy or something. But the tower comes along when things that have been built don't have a solid foundation, and it's time to kind of turn them over, recycle them, or build them anew. So the potential here is that there's this. It's like planting new seeds for the soul because again, sun represents the soul. It represents purpose. It represents vitality. So especially, and again, December 16th, I know that the world pretty much lives, primarily lives on a solar calendar. And so we celebrate the new year, usually January 1st, because of the sun. But, um, astronomy wise, astrology wise, the sun is rebirth on December 21st with winter solstice. And so these last few days, as sun is moving through Mula Nakshatra, you might actually take that to mean or encourage you to, really sit and reflect a bit on, what is your purpose? What is, and if you have a purpose, then you'll create direction in your life. Yeah. And, maybe what are things that have fed your soul in the past, but maybe it's time to plant new seeds. And again, that's the theme of the month. Um, yeah. So again, it could be a very productive time for reflection and again, planting new seeds and intentions for the upcoming year between December 16th and especially, uh, well, the rest of the year, because the sun is going to stay in Mula until December 29th. So, you know, yeah, that sort of thing. And it could be kind of like a resolution type thing, but I would even go deeper than that. Like I would, because resolutions, I don't know, I guess sometimes it's like short-term goals or they'll have a list, a long list of them and that sort of thing. But it's really about, I think this is even deeper than that in terms of like, what am I really here for? What's my deeper soul purpose? I think that kind of question is really what's potentially on the table if you choose to look at it during this time. So, yeah, shifting, turning over, that sort of thing. December 21st, the winter solstice. I will have a separate video on that horoscope. But it is, in some ways the birthday of the sun. And especially after the winter solstice, that's considered a very auspicious time to begin new projects from winter solstice till summer solstice, because it's kind of like instead of midnight till high noon, it's kind of like this annual year version of that, where the light of the sun is building, right? And the vitality that the sun brings is building. So that's generally considered a much more auspicious time to begin, especially new projects. So keep that in mind. Um, And even it's I've seen that or have read that especially highly enlightened souls, if they manage to, and I don't know if they can consciously do this or it's just that it's just a sign when it does happen, that if they actually pass away and die after between that time of winter solstice and summer solstices, that's considered to be a sign of an auspicious death, an auspicious life that has passed. So anyway. December 22nd, Mercury crosses Sun as it's retrograding. We will have Mercury retrograde. And so Mercury represents things like communication and travel, and Sun, as I've been mentioning, represents boss and work. So there can be a communication issue with boss and work, travel issues. It could also mean releasing old relationships that no longer serve. So that might be part of this whole Sun and Mula energy that we're all going to be experiencing. And then December 27th, Jupiter will have a direct aspect on the Sun. So that's kind of nice because that healing energy from the Sun, or excuse me, the healing energy from Jupiter is directly shining onto the Sun, and Sun is sitting in a sign of Jupiter. So Sun, even though it's going through this deep transformation of some kind, it's encased in this benevolent energy of Jupiter. So that's quite nice because it brings Jupiter's is a planet that represents spirituality, compassion, healing, balance, justice. So, that's not a bad way for the sun to experience the Mula Nakshatra, is just, embedded in this Jupiterian energy. So, there's and again, Jupiter, especially being in Ashwini, will bring this energy of like healing and release of this energy of this skirmish that has happened because Sun is going through Mula, but also as the Sun continues on. And again, as I mentioned, the end of the month, there's going to be some, I think, difficulty coming up. Then on December 29th, Sun enters Purvashada Nakshatra. And Purvashada is symbolized by a winnowing basket, so a basket that you kind of shake to have wheat grains remove their kind of husk or hull. It separates the seed of the wheat from the hull. And so, that's a kind of a slow shifting energy there. So it's kind of like, I think of Purvashada as a place where things are processed, like slowly processed, no, not like a factory, a machinery type process. But, again, there's this with Sun here, then the Sun symbolizing the soul and the career and direction, purpose, mission and life and that sort of thing, pretty deep core, consciousness and functioning levels. There's an opportunity here if you take it to really think through that, sort through that, and decide on maybe planting new seeds and moving in a new direction if you feel like that's appropriate and of the right time. So during my monthly transit videos, I like to put in a few celebrity charts just to kind of help embody the energies rather than have them be so abstract. So it looks like Mr. Elvis Presley has Sun in Sagittarius. So let's look at his chart a little bit. He was born on January 8th, 1935 at 4:35 a.m. I need to change that, I think. Hold on. Yeah, I think I need to change that. So he was born in the morning, 4:35. I have PM. Hopefully I remember to change that to AM. He was born in Tupelo, Mississippi in the United States. His Lagna Nakshatra, assuming this is correct information, is Jesta, which we just talked about, is this kind of protective energy. And then the Moon Nakshatra is in Shatabisha, which is, we talked about Shatabisha. Currently, Saturn is in Shatabisha. Here in his chart, it's in Dhanashta, but it's moving into Shatabisha. Saturn was just in Dhanashta last month for a few weeks before it finished retrograding and started going progressive through Shatabisha. So actually, these energies you already know a little bit about. There's this kind of protective energy in the lagna and the personality, and he was somebody who was actually quite shy, despite his career, very public career, and some of the things he did in his career being sort of provocative with his music and movement style and things like that. But he was actually quite shy. He was into music since he was a kid, and when he started performing publicly, a lot of people that he knew for a long time didn't even know that he sang. And he used to get stage fright. So that might have actually been. We'll talk about his chart more of that, but that also might have been why um, he was kind of pulled in two directions. I think his natural energy was to be protective and kind of be in a shell, and especially because he's a Scorpio lugna, a Scorpio rising sign. The scorpions have this protective shell. Yeah. And so he had that, and that was natural for him, but he also had this really strong ambition. So this tension between his really strong driving ambition, which he was also um, in that energy, that Rahu energy, because he was born into Rahu Mahadasha, that's a planetary period. So he was ambitious from birth, but he was also quite shy. So I think in order for him to fulfill the ambition and get over his shyness, I think that's where some of these, like the drug use, started filtering into his lifestyle and stuff like that. Um, so the day lord here, he was born on a Monday, and our lord, the Hora lord, was also moon. So moon represents the public, and I mean, who's more of a public figure than this guy? Nobody, probably. His birth Mahadasha or Dasha was Rahu, Jupiter, Saturn, Moon. Um, and so Rahu is ambition, Jupiter is kind of expansion. And then you can see I circled in this blue circle here, Saturn is very close to the moon. So for him, well, anybody who has a Saturn that's close to the moon, he was born into Sadhisati. Sadhisati is a 7.5 year period where the Saturn goes through the constellation before, during, and after the moon, because it takes 2.5 years to go through each constellation. So if Saturn's moving through 3 constellations, that's about 7.5 years typically. And that's a marker when somebody's born into Sadhisati that they grew up at a time that was quite difficult, and that time really kind of mark them and change the way that they view the world. It affects their mind because the moon represents the mind. It kind of brings some would say darkness or anxiety to the mind, or suspicion, that sort of thing. Um, a little bit of a dark cloud. Yeah, born under a dark cloud. You can kind of think about it that way. Um, and the thing is that, for him, that Saturn and Moon Sadhisati combination aspects onto his lagna. So this also not only is a marker for Sadhisati for him, but it's a marker that his mind in general is going to have Saturnian influence. So anxiety, depression, suspicion, skepticism, that sort of thing. So he really had to work on his mind, and that's probably why the drug use again came into his life, because he really needed to bolster his mind to again fulfill this driving ambition he had. Unfortunately, he didn't live very long. He died at the age of 42, and he died in Saturn, Moon, Mercury. So look again, even when he died, now this kind of deeper temporary energy of Saturn, Moon has moved up into the forefront of his experience and his lens for living life. And so Saturn, Moon, we talked about Moon being the intuitive mind, the emotional mind, and emotions in general, home, mother, nurturing, that sort of thing. But also now we have Mercury. Mercury is the rational mind and analytical mind. So we have Saturn with Moon and Mercury, both of the planets representing the mind. So again, there's a lot of darkness enveloping his mind when he died, which is true. was, I think, drinking quite a lot and was doing quite a bit of drugs and stuff like that. So, and he was also trying to make a comeback, attempting that because his career really kind of nosedived. He flew off during the Jupiter period because Jupiter comes after Rahu, but then towards the end of Jupiter, because Jupiter you can see here is in the 12th house of loss and expenses, although it's also in the house of foreign places. So even though he developed an international career, there were also losses there. Yeah. So anyway, let's look at his chart. We'll go through a little bit. So his rising sign is Scorpio. Again, this is a North Indian style chart. If you're not familiar with the style, and the top square diamond is the rising sign, Lagna, first house, ascendant, all different names for the first same thing. And then to count houses in the North Indian style chart, you count counterclockwise. So the second house, you go backwards. So the top upper left triangle there, that's the second house. And then you count around after the first. All right, so the Lagna, Scorpio or Vrishika, that already tells us quite a bit about somebody without even having any planets or anything else going on or available to us. So Scorpio people, Scorpio is ruled by Mars, and Mars is a planet that symbolizes things like initiative, action, leadership, uh, muscle, libido, um, innovation, that sort of thing. Also being rebellious. And he was all these things. We do have an aspect of Saturn into this first house. And the thing about Saturn is it's in Dhanishta nakshatra. Dhanishta is symbolized by a drum. So often when I find people with important placements in Dhanishta, they can be very interested in music, as he was. So Scorpio is a fixed water sign. If you don't know what that means, I would look at my video on constellation categories because these are categories of constellations. So it's fixed means that he's somebody that fixed signs, people who are very steady, and sometimes so steady they have a hard time adapting or changing. And a water sign, somebody who's a water sign is somebody who lives primarily in the world of feelings and emotions. So this is somebody who had deep feelings, was protective of self because that's Scorpio's energy. Scorpio's that hard shell. But then you also have this Saturn aspecting onto it. So there's this kind of like suspicious, anxious energy. And then also the Lagna nakshatra is Jesta, so this protective energy. So he was kind of like sort of an exaggerated Scorpio. You can kind of think about it that way. So words that came to mind when I was looking at emotional, but also sadness, anxiety, suspicion. That's the Saturn aspecting into the first house. Difficulty changing habits, adapting, musical, that's the Dhanishta. But, sexy and sexual, that's definitely, a Scorpio type. They just tend to exude that kind of energy, even if maybe they're not your type. you know, um, because the eighth house, Scorpio is the natural eighth house for the natural zodiac. And the eighth house is deep psychology and sexuality and things like that. So, who else has an eighth house or Scorpio Lugna? Oh, Kim Kardashian. So, hello, she's all about that. And again, because Mars is ruling Scorpio, rebelliousness here, and just Scorpio in general is about deep transformation. Um, and Elvis was like a hands-on guy because his Mars actually was in Hasta nakshatra. Hasta is symbolized by hand. So he was somebody who liked to maintain control, and his Mars went to the 11th house of income, but also clubs, groups, and society. So he had a grip on public. You can think about it that way. Um, yeah, and also the 11th house represents Kamastana, which is a house of enjoyment. So he was looking to enjoy himself in life. That was his primary purpose, Whereas other people, their ruling planet goes to a dharmasthana, house of duty, or a mokshasthana, house of enlightenment or freedom, liberation. Yeah, so I believe all that was true for Elvis here. Then if we look at the second house, so in his chart, I think the second house and third house were very important for him, first and seventh as well. But let's look at the second house. So we have Sun here in Purvashada. So Purvashada again is a winnowing basket. So career is kind of shifting and sorting through things. Mercury's combust, meaning that it's so close to the sun you can't see it. And that was in Uttarashada. Uttarashada is a nakshatra symbolized by an elephant tusk. So there's this kind of piercing, formidable, victorious quality there. And then it was aspected by this Mars and Hasta. And also the second lord is this Jupiter and Vishaka. And Vishaka is a nakshatra that's symbolized by a victory gate. Although Vishaka, it can be kind of a harsh energy. It can be like a winning at all costs type thing. And that may be part of why his Jupiter is in the 12th house. Because even though in the beginning of his Jupiter period, things really took off, by the end of the Jupiter period, I mean, he himself was toast because he gave it his all. I mean, again, he had such a strong drive to succeed that he kind of even used himself up. Yeah. And so there were losses at the towards the end of his Jupiter period. And he only lived a few years beyond the Jupiter period. So yeah, that's why he kind of went up and down in that Jupiter period. So from the second house, what do we see? Successful career. So that's the sun with the Jupiter, the second house lord, and Vishaka. But again, it's a hard driving type of. It's not an easy win here for the career. It was a successful career, but definitely some collateral damage that happened to him. At least his health for sure, if not his mental health. And there's again we get this kind of gripping, sexy, provocative voice and face, which he was both a singer as well as an actor, and he's known mostly for his voice and his face. Yeah. So, and communication is here because we have Mercury, which is a planet symbolizing communication, and Mars is a planet symbolizing like muscle and movement. So this kind of again provocative, gripping energy here in the second house. Yeah. Then the third house, we have Venus and Rahu both in Uttarashada. So more of this elephant tusk energy. So piercing, powerful, um, you know, energy here with Venus, the planet symbolizing art in the house of classic arts, and Rahu, the planet symbolizing unusual things as well as ambition. So here, if you combine all this, you can see you get like art and physical expression. And the reason why physical expression, the third house, if you've watched the video on the second house and third house that I've created, the third house is more about physical expression, and the second house is more about oral expression and communication. So here, his art was physical expression and also unusual. And it was because he was part of how he kind of came up through the musical world was he was bringing forward African American music to more of a general population, which was controversial in many ways. Also, he was singing pretty, sensual, sexy songs here, and he grew up in the church. So, the church community was not very happy with him, especially when he started gyrating, pretty provocatively on camera. That was appreciated by that community. So, yeah, and then the third lord is again this Saturn and Dhanishta, so music. Yeah. Um, and he may have also had musical siblings. See, I didn't realize he was a twin, but apparently his twin was stillborn. So, let's see, fourth house we sort of talked about already. So we have Saturn. It's in its own house. It's gonna be super strong. The moon has digbal or directional strength, so the moon is also strong, although moon is also karka bhava nasha. So we have an exaggerated moon, which, again, plays more into this idea that, there's some mental health issues, again, from early on. And this Saturn moon combination is directly aspecting to his 10th house of career and fame. So, musician for the public, that all works there. But it seems like his life may have been a bit cold, possibly disciplined. What I'm seeing here with the Saturn here, and also a musical background from childhood, and he was actually playing music and instruments from. He couldn't read music, but he could listen and reproduce the music, so that worked out for him. And again, the Sati Sati. So then the fifth house here, we have aspected by this Mars, so, Hasta. So he was an emotional rebel, also somebody who, again, was taking control and of things, was a hands-on leader, you could say. Sixth house here is a bit disruptive. We have this really strong Saturn aspecting into the Aries, which we do now, actually. So you can kind of feel that energy in your own life, probably. But the Saturn is really gonna kind of disrupt this sixth house of daily habits, especially when he went into his Saturn period. So, that's where we can get into like eating habits and drug habits and all the sort of thing that's going to catch up with him. We also have on here Jupiter and Mars are both aspecting in this house as well. So Jupiter was probably a better time for him, but Saturn definitely got this house for him slipping. Um, yeah, so a difficulty there with it, and also not just disruptive habits but also a lot of disruptive enemies. Like I was reading about his in his biography, when he would show up to concerts. There was just something about him that's kind of like a lightning, like a lightning rod. Where, so I mean, even though I guess the ladies really were, drooling over him, a lot of guys just really took it personally, I guess, what he was doing, or were very threatened by him or something. And so a lot of times he would show up to concerts and guys just wanted to like fight with him, and I don't know what that was about, but that was a pretty common phenomenon for him, which you could, again, see that he had some pretty serious enemies in his life from that chart, or that house, the sixth house. The 11th house I mentioned, he has that gripping Mars. So he's just, and they even mentioned his biography, like, if he did some little gyration move or something on stage and he got a big reaction from the crowd, like he really started milking that. So he was quick to pick up on what was getting the crowds going, and he would just play off on that quite a bit. But money, pleasure, all this sort of thing, that's all the 11th house. And then the 12th house, as I mentioned already, that's when he became an international star. But also he started, losing his footing at the same time towards the end of that Dasha period. So where does his success come from? Because I don't think he would actually necessarily get that from his birth chart. Assuming this is his correct birth chart, seems like it works. But there might be another turning of the chart where things would look even better. But I did look at I didn't put this up, but I did look at his D11, his sub-zodiac or sub-chart, divisional chart on income as well as awards. And so in that, he had Rahu, Ketu, and Moon in the fifth house of Capricorn. And the fifth house represents things like arts as well as the stage and mesmer, especially when you have Ketu, Rahu, Moon there. For him, success was all about mesmerizing people on stage, and that started because he was in Rahu when he was born. Started from a young age, and he was on stage when he was, I think, at least by 11, if not earlier. So he was a young kid. And then Jupiter for him was in Cancer in the 11th house. So his Jupiter was exalted in the 11th house of income, groups, societies. So all about charming the public. Yeah, and that was his Jupiter period for his income and awards. And then Saturn for him was in, I want to say, the 7th house, aspected by this Jupiter from the 11th house, and it was in Pisces. So Saturn was just nested in this Jupiterian energy. So again, more emotional energy and that sort of thing. But Saturn is what Saturn is. So Saturn isn't generally going to, there's usually, even when Saturn gives good things, and it can, there's still this energy of like delays and obstacles. And especially for him, his Saturn was on his moon from birth. So there's this anxiety, depression, skepticism, maybe even paranoia potentially if it gets really bad. That again, like, he got through Jupiter, and he's going to coast on Jupiter through the rest of his short life. But Saturn wasn't going to be as phenomenal as Jupiter. But I think it was more about the timing of Jupiter for him that set off this, because you can also see Jupiter as aspecting onto the Saturn moon. So it lifted up and expanded the Saturn moon and gave it some good energy and gave it some momentum. But then that's the thing too, is when you're looking at the junction points or Sunday points of a dasha period when it's switching, there's some overlap. It's not like one day. Sometimes it can feel like that, where like one day you're in one dasha and the next day you're in the other. There is this, overlap energy. And so especially with Jupiter and Saturn, those are both fairly long periods of time. And so you're going to have, I believe it's 2 or 3 years on either side of that Jupiter-Saturn junction, where in the Jupiter period, you're going to start to feel some of the Saturn creeping in, and he did, because the Saturn started sinking his Jupiter. And then the Jupiter, you're still going to feel some of this Jupiter in the beginning of Saturn period. And he did. He was making a comeback, but there was still a lot of issues and things like that. So he wasn't as near high flying as he was in the early part of his Jupiter career or Jupiter period. So that's Elvis Presley, Mr. Rock and Roll himself. So let's see. So other transits this month. So let's look at Venus and Mars, Shukra and Mangal in Sanskrit. So December 5th, Venus enters Swati Nakshatra. So Swati is symbolized by new grown grass blowing in the wind, so it's a very fragile energy. And December 5th, there may be this kind of fragile energy, new beginnings in love, romance, art, socializing, because those are the things that Venus symbolizes. Then on December 9th, Venus and Jupiter are in direct mutual aspect. This should be a nice little lift, because Venus and Jupiter are the two great benefics. And so when I see Venus and Jupiter together, and Venus and Jupiter are going to be aspecting each other through most of December, and I think that's going to give it that nice kind of, up, um, lifted, holiday cheer type energy through the month, which is nice, although that changes after Christmas, as I mentioned. But healing energy, social support, idealism, romanticism, good counseling, like, good advice, like that's nice. And especially on December 9th when they're in direct mutual aspect to each other. That same day though that Mars enters into Jyeshta Nakshatra. So Mars is entering that protective energy. So it's moving from Anurata, which is again more, I think, open and expansive, like building, creating victories, win-win situations. Mars is moving into more of a protective energy. Yeah, so. And Mars, again, can represent siblings. It can represent actions. It can represent military, that sort of thing. So, yeah. December 16th, Venus enters Vishaka Nakshatra. Vishaka is a nakshatra symbolized by a victory gate, but again, victory at all costs. So when I saw this, I was like, okay, all is fair in love and war. So December 16th, and I think that same day, yeah, Sun moves into Mula. So that can, it's starting to get a little bit tricky here. So luckily, Jupiter's still aspecting onto Venus, so that'll keep Venus within a certain bounds here. And Venus is in its own sign, so Venus is going to be strong, and it's got Jupiter on it. So that's nice. I think it's going to be more fair than not fair regarding love and war here. Then December 24th, Venus enters Scorpio or Vrishika. So now we're switching from this pretty high-minded air energy because Venus is in Libra until it enters Scorpio, and Libra is a movable air sign. So it's about ideas. So again, there's this kind of romantic thoughts or perceptions of things. And then we're moving into the actual emotions of things. And that's where the transformative, deep thinking about love, relationships, art is happening here. So we're kind of grounding to some extent these thoughts of romance and arts and that sort of thing into, how do we feel about these things? And that's December 24th. Then to December 27th, Venus enters Anuradha Nakshatra. Again, about building bridges here. And Mars enters Sagittarius that same day. So from 24th of December to 27th of December, Venus and Mars are going to be in the same sign. So there may be a little romance, actual romance happening in life for people. But it might be short-lived, and we'll see as we move through the rest of these transits why that might be. So just be a bit cautious, or keep your eyes wide open, or maybe at least try to dampen the expectations, even if you feel like there's a great connection or something. And for some of you, it will work, and for some, not, because of the own planetary periods that each person is going through and that are active in their own charts, and what these planets, what kind of results we would expect these planets to deliver based on the natal chart. Okay. Yeah, because then it gets a little dicier because Venus enters Anuradha Nakshatra, Mars enters Sagittarius, and that same day, Mars and Mercury get into a planetary war, graha, yuddha, and they're both Sunday, which is in the first degree of Sagittarius. So this is going to be a very precarious placement for Mars and Mercury. They're going to be destabilized because they're in their first degree of the sign. They're at war. Mars represents actions. Mercury represents words, communication. And they're going to be at odds with each other. Luckily, we have Jupiter in Ashwini aspecting all of this, which will help a bit. But this can be pretty messy here. So this might be a falling out with friends or siblings about philosophy, business, communication, because that's all Mars, Mercury, and Sagittarius in Mula in the first degree. Again, Jupiter aspecting here may take the edge off a bit or cushion the blow a bit, but it looks a bit messy on December 27th here. And also, it is going to be nice that Venus enters Anuradha because, again, if Venus represents loved ones, at least the loved ones will try to build bridges rather than, really ream people or really try to outmaneuver somebody else. So, but yeah, I mean, still, even if there's some cushions with Venus and Jupiter, this is still, with the combination of it being Sunday and Mula, still, I don't know, it can be messy. Then on January 1st, we do have a direct aspect of Saturn on Venus, and Saturn again is in Shatabisha. So things that are hard to heal, structure, delays, obstacles on Venus, which can be spouse-like partner, loved ones in generals, but it can also Venus also represents travel, art, vehicles, pets. And Saturn, again, For some people, this might mean an ending because Saturn could represent endings. So, again, depending on what planetary period you're running and what these planets show in your natal chart. So, even though there might be a romantic interest that pops up around December 24th, it's hard to say whether that will survive beyond the holidays and into New Year. So, again, enjoy things for what they are, but maybe just rein in your expectations a little bit. Yeah. Okay, so then let's look at Mercury or Buddha, as it's known as in Sanskrit, and what Mercury's doing in December. Mercury is going to be very active, as we'll see. So, yeah, let's go through it. So, December 7th, there's going to be a direct aspect by Jupiter and Mercury. That's going to be nice, actually, because Mercury is going to be quite challenged this month. Jupiter and Ashwini shining onto Mercury is going to help bring it up and bring some wisdom, maybe some spirituality to communications and decisions that need to be made. Right now, Mercury's in Mula Nakshatra, which I've been talking about Mula. So, planting seeds, Mercury seeds. So, Mercury seeds, communication, maybe gestating some business ideas, communication ideas. Because again, luckily Jupiter is, kind of covering or blanketing Mercury as it's going through Mula, and it will go back and forth because Mercury is also going retrograde this month. So at least Jupiter again should help take the edge off whatever Mercury experiences. And the thing though too is that if you have Mercury as an important planet in your chart, like maybe you're a Gemini rising or a Virgo rising or something like that. Um, you know, December is going to be a very transformative month um, for even, planting the seeds of a new identity. So keep that in mind, yeah. And even partially to January. So it's going to be a little bit of a process again if Mercury's important for your chart for some reason. December 8th, the next day, Mercury enters Purva Shada Nakshatra. So we're moving from this Mula kind of deep transformation energy, like a seed growing through the soil type energy, to Purva Shada, so winnowing basket. So again, separating the wheat from the chaff. So again, sorting through ideas after this new beginning. So that's sort of like now that we've planted the seeds, how do we start thinking about this in a new way and communicating about this in a new way because this is a deep transformation that happens. So, what kind of new mental habits and thought processes and stuff do we need to put in place to support the growth of this new venture, whether it's personal or actually business? Yeah. Then December 13th, Mercury goes retrograde. So, we're going to start to review these recent decisions. So, it may be almost like a two steps forward, one step back type of feeling or experience because it's almost like rather than just starting to really move forward, you start to move forward and then maybe you're like, I don't know, maybe I didn't make the right decision here, or maybe I should rethink this before I really step into it, really commit to this, and there might even be a little bit of regret here. Um, so again, it's Mercury's going to take its time going back and forth here to really decide what it wants. December 16th, Mercury re-enters Mula Nakshatra. December 17th, Mercury goes combust or asta. So, we're looking here when Mercury goes combust, asta. So when a true planet gets too close to the sun, it gets eclipsed by the sun's light, and so you can't see it anymore. And so that's going to happen with Mercury. And so Mercury, when a combustion happens, the, the outer expression of what the planet symbolizes will not be seen, but the inner experience will be more acute and more intense. So Mercury is all about organizing and planning and deciding and writing out pros and cons lists and that sort of thing. So a lot of internal stuff like that may be happening, but outwardly there may be radio silence because Mercury also represents communication. And it also represents things like travel and stuff like that. So there might be a lot of internal mulling over of things, but maybe not a lot of talk or outward action related to it. Um, yeah. And then the thing though too is that when Mercury goes combust, it's right there, um, pretty close to the sun, and sun is has just uh, um, entered Mula Nakshatra as well. So we've got this combust Mercury happening with the sun going through this transformative process, rebirthing process, um, regrowth process, and so it's like maybe there were some decisions that were made, and then as a review happens, it's kind of like, is this what I decided or what I've planned to do in alignment with my soul's purpose? And it's making sure that everything, yes, these things are aligned before the actual, um, outward development of that happens and discussion of it happens. Yeah. So then December 18th, Jupiter has a direct aspect on Mercury. Again, that's going to be nice. It's going to pick Mercury up a bit because Mercury's, this is a lot, like of sorting and analyzing and reviewing that Mercury's going through. So, I mean, Mercury's an important planet in my chart, so I'm already feeling it. I already, if you're sensitive to Mercury retrograde energy, um, I start to feel it about 3 weeks out, where things are just starting to slow down and going more internal and that sort of thing. And usually, random people from the past show up as well. So that's happening. It's kind of funny. I kind of sometimes that's the first sign I have that Mercury's going retrograde is random people from the past show up. So, yeah, okay. So with the Jupiter direct aspect on Mercury on December 18th, that can be like encouragement or inspiration to help, through this difficult passage. Because I don't think it's going to be light and fluffy. I mean, Mercury, Mula energy is not light and fluffy. So even though Jupiter's there, it's happening in the sign of Jupiter, and Jupiter's aspecting into the sign at the same time. Jupiter can only do so much because, it's just like growing pains. Yeah. So it's just a natural part of the process. There's some stretching, internal stretching that happens, yeah. So then December 22nd, Mercury crosses Sun as it's retrograding. So again, reviewing of old ways to see what needs to change for new momentum. Then, as I mentioned, the 27th through 28th of December, Mercury and Mars are going to be in planetary war. So there's going to be some conflict here between thoughts and actions, decisions and initiative, friends versus siblings potentially. Again, depending on which houses this is happening in and which houses Mercury and Mars are, ruling in the chart and what planetary period you're going through. So everybody's going to have a different take on this, obviously, but these are the general energies going on. Then December 28th, Mercury re-enters Scorpio Rishika. It's still retrograding and it's going to be in Jyesta Nakshatra. So again, rethinking how to protect oneself, um, moving forward into this new journey and um, self-transformation that's happening. And on January 1st, Mercury goes progressive. And so now we're going to start to get some forward movement, some true forward movement. A new clear beginning after some mental struggle, adjustment, anxiety that's been happening. Yeah. So 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And then, so another celebrity chart I have here. And this celebrity chart is for Stan Lee. If that doesn't ring a bell, Stan Lee was the founder of, I believe, the founder of Marvel Comics, or at least an important figure there. So he was one of the creators of comic book heroes and characters such as Spider-Man, Iron Man, Hulk, Black Panther, many others. And in addition to be a cartoonist, was a producer of a lot of these works. And so he is actually the highest grossing person in film of all time. So he made a lot of money off these superheroes. So Stan Lee was born December 28th, 1922 in New York City, New York. USA. I did not find a birth time for him. So this is his Chandra Lagna chart, his moon rising chart. And we can look at Aries here because the moon was in Aries all day on the 20th of December. So the moon was somewhere in Aries. Most likely the moon nakshatra is Ashwini because the moon was in Ashwini most of the day, although it could be in Bharani as well. And the day lord was Jupiter because he was born on a Thursday. His birth dasha, he was probably born in Venus because most of the day would have created a Venus Mahadasha, but he could also be born in K2. I'm not sure that's a big shift for him, but so let's look at his chart. So his Chandra Lagna, he's Aries or Mesha rising. So again, this is his moon rising chart. Aries is a movable fire sign, so very active for two reasons. Movable signs are active, and fire signs are active. So a very active guy, probably hyperactive because his mind is there. Especially when the moon is in Aries, and especially Ashwini, you can get somebody who's like ADD, like their mind is just always going. That's a possibility, which I'm thinking he was, not just as a cartoonist, but as a publicity guy, because we'll see in his chart that he had both of those things going on. But so his moon in the first house of this Chandra Lagna was aspected by Jupiter in Swati. And Jupiter, again, is a spinific energy, it's an expansive energy, and Swati is represented by new grown grass blowing in the wind. So he was about birthing characters. That's what I'm seeing here. And an expansive imagination, clearly. Also, public voice, child psychology. All of that was here in this Moon Jupiter combination in Aries and Libra, because Libra can be seen for him was his house of independent business. So, all of this birthing new characters, child psychology stuff, that was his business, really. His Lagnatia in this moon rising chart was Mars. Mars has gone to the 11th house, kind of like Elvis Presley. So enjoyment and income and clubs, group, society. Um, so that was all true for him. I mean, that's what comics, even if they're, bring some education or moral education or something like that, like, they're fun, right? I mean, more than like really dry text with no fun, colorful pictures and stuff like that. So that's his lugna a little bit there. But if we look at before we get into the other houses, the overall chart, he has a Kala Sarpa yoga. So I have a whole video on that. So a really ambitious guy. He has a gajakesari yoga. So that's I don't have videos on these last two here, but a gajakesari yoga is basically when the moon and Jupiter are in certain combinations with each other. Um, you can get somebody who's like who's a huge networker, and he clearly was. Somebody who's just knows a lot of people, huge Rolodex, huge list of contacts and stuff like that. He also had a budhditya yoga. So that's when Mercury gets very close to the sun and it's combust, which happens a lot because Mercury's so close to the sun. It's the closest planet to the sun. But yeah, for him, sometimes we like to qualify that by making sure that the Mercury Sun combination is related to the first, second, or fifth house. Um, but again, we don't have an exact birth time for him. So it looks like he does have a Buddha Jitta yoga, but we'd have to qualify it. So just those three yogas alone will give us the sign that this person is ambitious, a networker, and has a brilliant mind. So that's helpful for a very ambitious, successful person. The second house we have aspecting by Venus, and Venus will be in its own sign, the second house, so that's going to make it strong. And then Venus is an Anuradha nakshatra. So Anuradha again is about building bridges. So especially with the second house, this guy was probably a smooth talker and very good at socializing and gaining support of his ideas, is what I'm getting here. And he was passionate about it because he has Mars aspecting into the second house. So, and Mars is in Purva Bhadrapada. So he might have at times been a bit too aggressive, possibly, because Purva Bhadrapada, the symbol of that is the front legs of a funeral cot. And so it could be that he pushed his luck on occasion too much. The other thing is that like there's this dynamic contrast between Venus and Anuradha. So like this would be the superhero, and Mars and Purva Bhadrapada could be the villain. So he's, very good about convincing people or talking about heroes and villains, which is his whole life, right? So that works. But the second house also, like a very passionate and successful voice, was important for him. The third house, um, he had was aspected by Mercury, and also Sun. Mercury was Swa in the third house, and Sun was aspecting the third house. Both of these were in Purvashada. So again, this winnowing basket. So we have a lot of this winnowing basket here. And that makes sense because, again, drawing these characters and developing these characters, I mean, that takes a long time. Like you kind of go through different drafts and stuff like that. And this third house also is, again, like more of a physical way of communicating rather than an oral way of communicating. So this is where his cartoonship and all this, and probably he also wrote gobs and gobs of publicity things that were supportive of his work. And so that's all there as well. So in the third house, he has these Mercury aspecting here, the Sun, also Jupiter. Jupiter represents publishing. Saturn is in Chitra, so the structure. So structuring, publishing, communicating, career. That's pretty much Stanley right there. So, and again, forming these new characters, drawing, publishing, and a slow development process. Yeah, that's all there. Especially slow back then, back in the day. I mean, now there's like computers and programs and softwares that can speed that up, AI and all that. But back in the day, at some point, and it's even like what is it? Some manga, I think Japanese manga. I mean, they still draw all those like you know hundreds, if not thousands, of pictures by hand. I mean, that's impressive. Yeah, just the amount of work that goes through that. So, the fifth house here we have aspected by Mars. So yes, again, fiery, innovative intellect, and especially because it's in Leo. This is going to be a public. He's going to be a pretty fiery guy. I haven't actually seen him talk or anything, like a video on him, but I'm guessing in public he was just like a dynamic character, is what I'm seeing here. He gave a dynamics talk, I'm guessing, from this. Sixth house, we have Rahu and Uttara Falguni. So enjoyment, but with a purpose. And Saturn, Rahu and Saturn can represent foreigners, and Rahu can represent unusual things. But it's like in Virgo, which is a very contained type of energy. Um, Rahu can also represent things like obsessiveness and imagination. So you kind of get from this house, maybe containing foreign enemies like the big villain in these cartoons, and imagination obsessing about these things, which you'd have to do. I mean, you kind of, they sort of, even though they're just somebody's ideas, I mean, they create a life of their own, right? I mean, they sort of become real, even if they originally were just a thought in somebody's head. And entertainment with a purpose. So there was clearly entertainment. I mean, especially kids love this stuff, not just kids, but adults as well. But then it's, about, on some level, about, persevering and coming back and finding your, unique, specific talents in life. Everybody's got a superpower, right? So, inspiring people. And that's why, like, even little kids, they love to wear these, like, costumes and, like, run around and feel powerful and, that sort of thing. So that's all important. And then this Rahu Saturn energy aspects into the 12th house of hidden enemies. So again, there's more of this potentially obsessive type energy with this imagination going on here. Seventh house, he's got the moon and Jupiter there, so it reflects the what's going on in the first house, Lagna ascendant. The Lord of the seventh house is this Anurata Venus, so a very successful, collaborative Venus, so art and socializing and worldly counselor type energy. So we're talking successful art venture here, artistic venture here for his independent house of independent business. That's looking pretty good. His eighth house has this Venus again, an Anurata aspected by Saturn. So again, deep in the psychology is this, form of popular artist forming characters. So again, the Venus in Anurata is like superhero, and the Saturn in Chitra is like formation of characters and villains. So that's all there. Yeah, so this was Stan Lee. Yeah, pretty yeah, I think he just passed a few years ago. So yeah, I mean just I mean who doesn't know, one of Stanley, who doesn't know Spider-Man or Iron Man? I mean probably most people have seen or heard of them. So that's a pretty extensive reach throughout the world globally through generations. So, yeah. Okay, so then moon transits or chandra in December, and I'll have separate videos on this as well. Rather than get into all the details now. So December 12th, there's going to be a new moon in Scorpio, Vrishika. This is going to be Jason Nakshatra. So again, a protective energy. So it is this kind of pulling back energy, more of that side of Scorpio than Anurata, which is like, out and about and loud, or at least collaborative, loud in that kind of way, creating collaborations. Fixed water signs. So again, difficult to change, adapt, especially emotionally can be. The moon is debilitated here. So the moon is going to be challenged. So the emotional life, the emotional mind is going to be challenged here. And it's going to be conjoined with Mars and Sun in Jesta. So this potentially fiery, argumentative, maybe military protective energy is going to probably challenge the mind and emotions, looks like about mid-month here. And again, this protective energy can be physical or spiritual. But there's like a feeling that, bringing some protective energy to the purpose or mission, or having a mission that includes like protection of some kind. It can also be like a elder energy or senior role promotion type of thing, because the sun is career. So if Moon, Mars, Sun are all in Jesta, this could be like a promotion to more of a senior role, or like an elder type position. Yeah, if we're talking old school lifestyles or communities or cultures, that sort of thing. December 26th, there's going to be a full moon in Gemini, Mithuna. It's going to be an Ardra nakshatra. So this is going to be a bit tough, potentially. Gemini is a dual arrow sign, so it can flip back and forth. And it's an idea, energy. Luckily, the moon is in a friend sign here, so that's going to support the moon a little bit. But Ardra is symbolized by storm, like a storm cloud or a raindrop or teardrop. So there's going to be a lot of sadness here and psychology involved here with this nakshatra. So, and especially because it's in a dual sign, there's going to be sadness or mixed emotions regarding new decisions in work, business, purpose. Um, this whole thing that I've been talking about so far about all these planets moving through Mula and planting new seeds, it's like, that's tough. It's not easy to do that. It's, you got to shed your old identity, or at least partially, change your philosophy, change the way you communicate, thought process. Sometimes you have to let go of friends or colleagues, if you shift from one job to another, or even if you just shift, laterally or up the ladder, just that, the dynamic changes. So, if you become boss, the boss of your friends that you were all on the same level, I mean, that can be tough sometimes. They may not take it well, or they may get upset that you got promoted and they did, something like that. So it's not always easy, but again, luckily, Jupiter is reflecting on these planets, but the moon's going to be, I think, processing these emotions. It's going to be a little bit of a storm emotionally, especially on the 26th there. Um, and again, these seeds are underground, so this it might be quiet on the surface, but very deep below the surface, it's going to be very dynamic with all the stretching and growing mentally and emotionally to adjust to these new changes that are coming about. Even if they're good changes, it's still, discombobulating to, redirect oneself. So anyway, we'll look more deeply into these moon transits, new and full moon, and separate videos. So look out for that. Okie doke. So, I just, to be comprehensive here, I just mentioned Jupiter, Saturn, Rahu, Ketu very quickly, the outer planets, slowest moving planets, also known as Guru, Shani, and then Rahu, Ketu. So, the Jupiter aspects I've already talked about in the other slides. So, December 7th, Jupiter has a direct aspect on Mercury. On December 9th, Jupiter and Venus have a direct mutual aspect on each other. On December 18th, Jupiter has a direct aspect on Mercury again as it goes retrograde. So again, this Jupiterian energy is going to take the edge off the growing pains that are going on collectively for us. And there aren't going to be any changes with Saturn, Rahu, or Ketu. Yeah. So it's quick movements here with the fast moving planets. But it might actually be good that Saturn, Rahu, Ketu, and Jupiter, for the most part, are fairly stable. I need to add on here. Jupiter does go direct at the end of the month. I have to get the correct date. I want to say the 29th, but I will put the correct date on here before I upload this, so you'll have the correct date. But so Jupiter will start moving forward, but otherwise, I think it's probably a good thing to have these outer planets stationary currently, just to give some stability, especially after the last month. There was a lot going on coming off the eclipses in October, the end of October. So, yeah. Okay, so we have one more celebrity chart here, and this is Anand Kumar, who some of you may know of, maybe not all of you. But he is an educator who's done really amazing things, actually. So let's get into his chart. He was born January 1st. Oh, that's why I included him. Besides the fact that his chart is um, recreating a lot of the current transits and stuff like that. He was born on January 1st, so he's a New Year's baby. January 1st, 1973. He was born in Patna, Bihar, India. I couldn't find a birth time for him, so this is his Chandra Lagna. And his moon was in Scorpio all day, but also in Anuradha all day. So that already tells you a lot. We've talked about Scorpio quite a bit already. But Anuradha, again, his mind is all about building bridges and building alliances and win-win situations. Also, his day lord is a moon. So, you know, uh, that's pretty amazing. His emotional mind, intuitive mind is all about building in positive ways other people. Yeah. His Mahadasha, he was born in Saturn, and then he went to Mercury, and he's currently in the Venus Mahadasha. And as you can see from his chart, he was born pretty close to a solar eclipse. We've got Sun and Rahu, Sun very close to Rahu, and then Moon is moving towards that conglomeration. And so, a few days later was a solar eclipse. And I do have a video on solar eclipses, lunar and solar eclipses, and what all that means. But that's going to bring a lot of, it's going to make him a pretty unusual guy. So, but in good ways for him. And the thing that was that eclipse that happens on January 4th was mostly seen in South America, the bottom portion or lower southern portion of South America. So it didn't occur in India, which would have kind of emphasized that energy even more. Let's look at his Chandra Lagna here. So Scorpio, Vrishika, fixed water sign. I've mentioned these things in the other charts. So look at this. I mean, this was outstanding to me. This big red circle up and down on his first and seventh axis here. He's got Mars, Swa. That's going to give him strength in the personality as well as physical body. He's got a debilitated moon, but it's an Anurata. He's got Venus in Jesta, so this protective energy, aspected by Saturn and Rohini. Rohini is a nakshatra that's considered to be the most beautiful, attractive, seductive, even. And so Saturn, a planet of structure, with Rohini. I always kind of think of sculptors, like people who build beautiful sculptures, or who had Saturn and Rohini? Oh, I looked at Coco Chanel's chart. She has Saturn and Rohini. So she would build beautiful structures with clothes. Yeah. So, and the thing that really struck me here is that Mars, Moon, Venus, and Saturn are all considered passion planets. So he's got all of them lined up on this axis, like, and in his, Chandra Lagna. I was like, wow, I mean, super passionate guy, super passionate. And he, and when you get Mars and Saturn together, we're talking engineer, athlete, soldier type, beautiful structure I mentioned, success with the Anurata energy. But what he's successful at is building hearts and minds. That's what I'm seeing here with this combination. Um, so his Lagnatia is Mars. Mars is in its own sign. So again, even when Mars is in its own sign in the first house, what we're talking about is a leader, innovator of self-development, which is what he was all about. He was all about developing people and bringing them up and, that sort of thing. He has Saraswati yoga. He has a Kala Sarpa yoga. He has a Pravraja yoga. So Saraswati, I have a video on that. That's about being education and creativity. Kala Sarpa yoga, another ambitious guy here. Pravraja yoga is when you have four planets together in the same house, and that's an area of focus for somebody. Just very simply put. So somebody who's educated, creative, ambitious, and focused. Yes, this guy was. And you can see that Mars is enveloping Moon and Venus, and it's on Saturn. So Mars is very strong on three planets and it's strong in and of itself. And we have Jupiter in its own sign on Sun, Mercury, Rahu, and aspecting Ketu. So basically, this person's chart is dominated by Mars and Jupiter. Yeah. So Mars is going to be like a rebel or unusual, innovative leader in education, is what I was saying here. Because especially this Jupiter in the ninth house, or not in the ninth, in the ninth constellation in Sagittarius. Sagittarius is like is in the natural zodiac, like higher education. So Jupiter in its own sign, Jupiter represents higher education, education in general. You also have Mercury in there, and Mercury also. So you have two planets representing education in the constellation representing education. So, there you go. So the second house was also on fire, as you can see here with this Jupiter in its own sign. So let's see, Jupiter, Swa, it's in its own sign. Then you have Sun and Rahu and Purvashada. So again, this winnowing energy, this culling, cultivating energy. It's almost like farming, even though it's like not Taurus. It's farming of the mind, growing, cultivating, watering, adding shade and sunlight or whatever, like grow. And then Mercury and Mula, so planting new ideas, planting new thought processes. That's what he was. He was like a farming, cultivating people's minds. Um, And then we have Rahu here with ambition and drive. So driven, purpose, sun is there. That's career, purpose, and mission in life. So driven purpose is to speak, because the second house again is about oral communication. He was a classroom, kind of classical, up front in front of the blackboard type teacher. Speak about sorting through unusual and technical ideas, and education, times two, because Jupiter and Mercury are both planets symbolizing education. Gifted speaker, planting new ideas, thought processes. And this Jupiter and Rahu both, because you can take a fifth and ninth aspect of Rahu, because it's the dispositor of Jupiter's with it. And you can take a fifth and ninth aspect of Ketu, because it's the dispositor. Mercury is aspecting into that sign. So not only does this guy have a lot of Mars, so innovation, rebellion, leadership, and Jupiter, education, but he's an unusual guy. Rahu and Ketu, like unusual, unseen, unexpected, that sort of thing. Um, and technical ideas, like the Rahu and Ketu bring technical things. So he was an educator, but he taught essentially math, physics, science, essentially to uh, high school kids who are trying to get into high level math, science, engineering, collegiate programs in India. Yeah. I think mostly the IIT program, I guess that's considered the most prestigious or hardest to get into or whatever, highly desirable, very hard to get into. And he managed to get so many of his students into these programs that, he was definitely a standout that way. So anyway, this Jupiter Rahu energy is aspecting into his 10th house of career and fame. Um, but he also, Jupiter and Rahu are also aspecting into his 6th house of enemies. And Jupiter aspecting into Aries. We have Jupiter in Aries right now, so that's similar to the current sky pattern. So he's gonna have a lot of enemies, and he did. There's actually a movie about his life. It's called Super 30, and it's about the Super 30 program he created. If you're into Hindi movies, Bollywood movies, Hrithik Roshan, a big movie star, stars in that movie. It's actually pretty entertaining and interesting and inspiring. I thought it was a Disney movie, but I'm not sure that's true. I was trying to find that out. I didn't actually see that, but yeah. So Super 30 program was, at some point he started his own tutoring program to help kids, again, pass these entrance exams to these really prestigious math, science, and engineering programs in India. And then somebody came in, a kid who, didn't have the means, financial means to pay for the tuition. And then he was inspired to create this Super 30 program where he uh, chose 30 kids to go through this intensive tutoring program. And he even like housed them and fed them and all this sort of thing, just 30 kids. And there were several years where I think all 30 out of the 30 kids passed their entrance exams to these prestigious schools. And I think most of the graduates from his program, through the years, because it's been quite a few years now, most of them, like the majority of them, have passed. And that's even if like 50%, even if I think 20% pass, that's an amazing number. And his success rate is even higher, is like astronomically higher than that. So he's been touted by different organizations, and I think even President Obama, congratulated him and mentioned him, and he was in all these like magazines and papers of him, quote unquote, having the best institute in Asia. So I don't know how they determine this, but he definitely has a fantastic reputation in the education world. Um, yeah, but he did actually, there were enemies related to this, because he was not only, this program was innovative, not only because he was like, instead of doing a for-profit um, kind of setup with his business, but nobody ever really gave these, poor kids a chance to lift themselves up out of poverty this way. And it really flew in the face of the whole kind of business aspect of education in India. And so that's where, at least in the movie, and I don't know how much of the movie is true, but at least in the movie, he created enemies because he was making other people look bad. And, people were starting to question, like, them being so profit minded or whatever. And how much they were potentially, I don't know, gouging people for fees and all this sort of thing, and only affluent kids and families could participate. And so it was just, there was no opportunity at all for brilliant kids who just simply were born into families who didn't have money. You had no chance of, even trying to, gain access to these programs. And he, helped lift them up. So that was pretty innovative in and of itself. If we look at the fifth house for him, he's got the Lord of the fifth house is Jupiter. So that's going to be the mind of an innovative philosopher, because Jupiter and Sagittarius is definitely a philosopher type mindset. But also the moon is with the Mars and Venus and Saturn. So there you go. And the eighth house. Oh, the eighth house is just reflecting all this Jupiter, Sun, Rahu, Mercury energy. So yeah, it's just a mind. So just the intellect. The fifth house is intellect. The eighth house is deep psychology. It's just the mind of an innovative philosopher. Like his whole philosophy on life. Uh, because again, if he was so profit oriented, he probably wouldn't have bothered with these poor kids, giving them a chance. It's like, what's the point, I'm not making money off of it. But he created the kind of karma that gave him world fame, yeah, and success. His students are pretty successful. Not just in getting into the programs, but I think doing well in the programs. Although I haven't looked that far out, but so the seventh house here, independent business. He's got Saturn here. But he's got Venus aspecting into its own sign here. He's got Moon aspecting here. Moon is exalted in Taurus. He's got the super strong Mars. So, not only did he engineer people's minds and hearts, but he engineered his own business. So he's got his own successful enterprise here. Um, yeah, so pretty inspiring guy. And again, part of why I chose his chart was because he's got Jupiter aspecting Aries, and the current sky pattern is Jupiter's in Aries aspecting into Sag, but he's got Jupiter and Sag aspect in Aries, but the energies are similar there. He's got Saturn aspecting into Aquarius, which is the true for now and at this moment in time, and Saturn and Aquarius aspects into Saturn. So again, we have Saturn aspecting into Saturn aspecting into Scorpio. And then we've got Mercury, Sun, going through Mula and Purvashada. So, and we've got Mars and Moon and Venus going through Jesta and Anuradha. So, again, it's just when I add these celebrity charts in, it's just a way to kind of get more of a handle or kind of concretize some of these more abstract concepts from the astrology. Yeah. So anyway, super inspiring guy. Good movie if you get a chance to see it. If you're looking for something binge worthy during the holidays, you might check it out. Okay, so what does all this mean for you? Well, you won't know exactly because everybody's a little bit different. But if you're looking to be your own astrologer, first of all, don't stress yourself out about it, because sometimes a little information can freak people out if they don't understand all the nuances or whatever. But most of what we've been talking about are all the transits going through Scorpio and Sagittarius. So if you find out where Scorpio and Sagittarius are in your chart, that will give you more information about where these energies are playing out in your life. So if you look at this diagram here, we have a North Indian style chart on the first house at the top. And then we have the 1-7 axis here, which is the first house represents things like self, personality, health, reputation. And the 7th house represents things like spouse, partnership, independent business. So if Scorpio or Sagittarius is on either your first house or 7th house, you can layer in the meanings of the first and 7th house with the storylines that I've been talking about. Okay, and then you can see too, maybe Scorpio or Sagittarius lands in 2nd or 8th house for you. You can see, and I have listed here some very simple descriptions of what those houses represent, or the 3-9 axis. And if we look at the next slide, a Scorpio or Sag might be 4-10 for you, 5-11 for you, or 6-12 for you. So again, just to get a little bit more information, add another layer of interpretation if you're looking at your own chart. But again, just be careful not to scare yourself. Okay. All right. So there you go. There are the transits for the month. As always, I want to thank you for your time. I appreciate you listening to the talk and being interested in my work, the channel, Vedic astrology in general. I appreciate all the support, comments, and just listening, tuning in, questions, donations. It's all appreciated. So thank you so much for that. Also, if you happen to, I can't make any promises, but if there's any world famous person, whose chart you'd be interested in having me look at for one of these monthly transit videos, you might list their name in the comment section, and I'll check it out. And again, it helps me because I'm just collecting birth charts and things like that, so I can go through their charts, and so we can go through them, and you can again concretize some of this more abstract astrology stuff, these astrology concepts. So I can't promise I will actually use the chart, but I will add the names to my database if I can find decent birth chart information for them. And then again, at some point, they may pop up in one of my videos. Um, yeah, so if again, can't promise, but it would be helpful and interesting, I think, all around. So consider that if there's somebody, again, world famous, that because again, these videos are being seen in many countries across the world. So I really try to pick people that almost anybody could have possibly heard of. That's why I'm picking people like Elvis and Stan Lee, even though people may not know Stan Lee, but they probably know Spider-Man. And even Anand Kumar, he's pretty famous, mostly in educational circles, but he's been written up in around the world and been given awards around the world. So pretty world famous especially for a pretty young guy. So yeah, think about that. If you're interested in individual birth chart readings, I do those on Zoom. So if you want more information about that, you can email heartlightastra@yahoo.com. I also have another YouTube channel on natural medicine, where I talk about other Vedic arts such as Ayurveda and yoga, as well as other paradigms of natural medicine like homeopathy and naturopathic medicine. The name of that channel is called Nature Source Care, so you can check that out if that's interesting. So anyway, I hope you have a great December. Happy holidays, happy New Year, and I'll see you in the next talk. Take care. Namaste.